Good morning, everyone. The only announcement I want to make this morning is to make sure that you see the yellow announcement sheet. You may have been handed one when you came in. If you snuck in and didn't get one, they will be on the welcome table out there. They'll have a lot of different entries of things that are coming up that you might want to know about. And so check that out. Let's begin our service.
Good job, ladies. Well, welcome everyone. So good to see you all. It's so good to be back. Louder? Or you're waving? You're waving. Okay, but you have to remember that when we wave to our Zoom friends, that we have to turn around because they can't see you. It's good to see everybody. And I see Jerome and Babette are there, so I'm sure that they will be hosting an after Zoom get together for people who are on Zoom. And we also welcome all our YouTube friends that we don't know who they are, but we love that they're with us. And we ask them to like and subscribe. Subscribing is totally free, so don't be afraid to press that button. And we are excited to say that our youth, we had 5 youth and 3 adults travel yesterday, and they made it to Boulder. And today they're set to have some fun in the Rockies. And so they will be returning next Saturday, but this is their youth mission trip that you have all so delightfully supported. We have a Meet the Ministers. There's not a lot of us left right now. It's kind of Babs and I. But it'll be in the Sunrise Room, and it will be delightful. All who are visitors, who have been visitors for a long time, or who just want to come and meet people, and our members, all are invited. So we always have plenty of food. And the last thing is that we had roundtable dinners this weekend. We had 4 of them at 4 different houses. And we were really thrilled because we had a couple of new visitors come to the roundtable dinners, which gave us a chance to get to know them, and they are so fun. So I encourage you, if you haven't ever done one, sign up next time. They're very non-threatening. They really are. People all bring food and nobody's picky, and it's wonderful. So with that, let's come together in community.
Welcome to our community. Please join me in this responsive reading. May we be still, slow down, find the center. In this time, amongst these people, may we sit as truly as we are and be in comfort. May we open these depths to others, that we might cast light into darkness and wonder into reality. May we, in turn, be lifted up by the beauty and truth others offer. Amen.
Please rise as you're able.
Free from the stream. Since Erica is gone, I'm going to be taking her place today in chapel, and I want to welcome all the kids to come up for the puppet show. And if you see groceries in the aisle, please bring those.
Ready.
Hello, everyone. Hello. It is so good to be with you again. Jack, are you feeling okay?
Yes, I'm fine.
Are you sure? You look.
I said I'm fine.
Jack, dear, you're vibrating.
I don't know what that is.
You're shaking.
Yeah. Well, I'm mad, Hortense. I'm madder than a wet hen.
Oh, what?
I'm madder than a puffed up toad.
Jack, I've never seen
I'm
you.
madder than a mule chewing bumblebees.
Jack, calm down and tell me what.
I'm sorry, Hortense. It's just, well, I want to calm down, but when I think about it, it just makes me madder, and then I feel like I'm gonna explode.
Oh, dear. Try to breathe. Maybe just a little. Yeah.
Breathe. Yes, I should breathe.
Okay, now try to tell me what happened.
Well, somebody threw a bunch of trash down my rabbit hole.
Trash?
Yeah, bunch of candy wrappers and stuff. Thought it might have been Mr. Monkey playing a joke on me, but then I saw the licorice wrappers, and my buddy hates licorice. And then I thought, well, there's really not enough candy wrappers to be Mr. Monkey, so. Yeah, so I don't know who it was, but boy, and then I try to calm down, and then I think and think and think.
Oh my, try to breathe a little more, Jack. There you go. Jack, breathe in and out. There, that's better, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that's good, Jack. Keep breathing. Hey, maybe count to 10.
I would, but I only learned up to 7.
Oh, okay. Well, you are looking a little better. Do you think you need some help cleaning up your rabbit hole? Gabby the goat will help you, I bet. She loves trash.
No, thanks, Hortense. I already cleaned it up. I guess it wasn't that much. It's just the idea that somebody would.
Time to breathe more, Jack.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
I worry when you do that to yourself.
To myself, I didn't throw trash in my rabbit hole. That's just silly, Hortense.
No, of course you didn't, Jack. I meant that you get yourself all in a lather.
I don't know about lather, but what are you talking about, Hortense?
Oh, Jack, does being angry feel good?
What?
When you get so mad, does it feel better or worse?
Hortense, being real mad is exhausting.
Yes, it is. And did you know that's a choice we make?
A choice? Sometimes you don't make any sense at all, Hortense. No offense.
Oh, well, none taken. Yes, Jack. We can all choose whether to get angry or not. Really? I know it sounds impossible, but we get to decide whether we get angry when something bad happens to us. It can be difficult, but once we realize that we don't have to be angry, it's easier to stay calm.
So you're saying I can choose not to get all mad when somebody trashes my rabbit hole? Oh, okay, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna choose to calm down. I'm gonna breathe.
Yeah. Doesn't that feel better?
Yeah, a little bit, does kind of feel better.
Good job, Jack.
Yeah, it's not near as exhausting, but I think I still need a nap. But say, you know what?
What, Jack?
I forgot all about our lesson this morning, but I think we accidentally had a lesson right here anyway.
You know, it does seem to happen that way a lot. We can end our time together by just reminding everyone that even though it's hard sometimes, we can choose to stay calm if we really put our minds to it. Thanks for coming down, everybody.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
As you close your eyes, sink into the stillness. Let these periods of rest and respite reassure your mind that all its frantic fantasies were but the dreams of fever that has passed away. Let it be still and thankfully accept its healing. No more fearful dreams will come now that you rest in love.
On this Sunday following our Juneteenth, I bring you an adaptation of a prayer by Howard Thurman. It's his prayer for peace. Howard Thurman was an African-American Christian theologian. Many consider him to be a mystic in our modern time. And he also was a civil rights mentor to Martin Luther King and many others that were part of that movement back at that time. His language is a little different from what ours is, but I think his message works for us anyway. But as we do this prayer, we also lift up our own Bruce and Dee, along with Bruce's brother Leon and all the others who are saddened by the unexpected death of Leon's wife, Linda, from a heart attack this past week. We remember our friends on hospice care, Jackie and Roger and Joyce and their caretakers. We celebrate with Steve that the reoccurrence of his cancer is a very manageable situation and that will go well for him. We lift up Betsy and Larry as Larry continues to recover at home from a heart procedure. We remember all those that are impacted and continue to be impacted by the senseless tragedy surrounding one Juneteenth celebration that happened here in Round Rock. We celebrate with Yvonne, who got his driver's license this past week. For anyone who doesn't know who Yvonne is, he and his mother have been living in our church seeking sanctuary for a very long time, and now he's got his driver's license, so exciting times. We also lift up healing prayers for Marty, who is in the hospital after a serious fall, and we lift up all others that are recovering from surgeries or injuries. For all of them, we wish that they may be happy, they may be well, they may be safe. And now our prayer from Howard Thurman. Our Creator, fresh from the world with the smell of life upon us, we make an act of prayer in the silence of this place. Our minds are troubled because of the anxieties of our hearts that lie deep and searching. We are stifled by the odor of death which envelops the earth because in so many places we fight against each other in our one human family. The panic of fear, the torture of insecurity, the ache of hunger, all have fed and rekindled ancient hatreds and long forgotten memories of old struggles when the world was young and thy children were but dimly aware of thy presence in the midst. As humans, we are sometimes proud and arrogant, sometimes selfish and greedy. We have harbored in our hearts and minds much that makes for bitterness, hatred, and revenge. While we wait in thy presence, search our spirits and grant to our minds the guidance and the wisdom that will teach us the way to take, without which there can be no peace and no confidence anywhere. Teach us how to put at the disposal of thy purposes of peace the fruits of our industry, the products of our minds, the vast wealth of our land, and the resources of our spirit. Grant unto us the courage to follow the illumination of this hour to the end that we shall not lead death to any person's door, but rather may we strengthen the hands of all in high places and in common tasks who seek to build a friendly world for all people beneath a friendly sky. This is the simple desire of our hearts, which we share with thee in quiet confidence. Amen.
We have two scripture readings today, one from Timothy, one from James. Avoid futile and silly debates, for they breed quarrels. And as a servant of Christ, you must not engage in quarrels. Instead, be gentle with everyone, a good teacher, patient and tolerant. Remember this, my dear sisters and brothers. Be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to anger. For God's justice is never served by our anger. Ancient words from our tradition for our present day understanding.
Thank you, David. Before I get started this morning, I wonder if we might have a shout out for the staff. That is, they have done such a wonderful job during Jim's absence and his recovery from surgery, and they will do it for as long as necessary. You know, church work is sometimes very much like herding cats, and they are great herders and doing a super job. So if we could just give them a round of applause. And that concludes my message. I wonder if, all right, I heard that. Oh, gosh. It's going to be hard to shift now into something that's pretty serious. I wonder if we have a shared experience, if you are having things happening in your life that are happening in mine. I find this to be the case in particular when I'm alone by myself in one of those periods of introspection. I find occasionally I'm overcome, for lack of a better word, by a sense of hopelessness. What I mean by that is I ask myself, well, how as a society did we get to where we are today? How did this happen? And worse than that, how in the world do we find a path forward? And it's really a discouraging conversation to have with yourself. Now, the good news is that Jim's recent sermon series, which I thought was one of his best, has helped me crystallize my thinking about my own experiences, but it's also reminded me of just how important intrinsic values are. And I'll talk a little bit more in just a minute about intrinsic values. What I discovered, though, is that 2 weeks ago, Rick talked about some of these same concerns in his sermon, and then last week, Erica did the same thing. And the interesting thing is that we didn't talk among ourselves. We didn't say, okay, let's find a common thread that we can talk about while Jim's away. We just did this on our own. And I think it's because we're all concerned about the same issues in society and where we are and what we can do about the problems that we're confronting. Now, I say all of this because I'm convinced that as a society, we're becoming more and more driven by what I would call extrinsic values. More and more people seem to be tending in that direction. And what I mean by that is more and more folks seem to be motivated by a desire for personal gain, which means that they are inclined to objectify and exploit others. They behave more aggressively. I'm sure you've seen examples of that almost every day. And they really are rejecting social concerns. The problems of society that we need to be resolving are going, in many cases, unattended. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, I think, is why is this occurring? And of even more concern, until very recently, why does it seem to be occurring even more rapidly? It's escalating as we go forward in time. Now, there are some usual causes that we're all familiar with, but frankly, Jim talks about these most every Sunday. Let me remind you of them. But I will try to make the case that we can go beyond that, because my view is that we are experiencing, for lack of a better term, what I would call a perfect storm. But let's talk about the ones just for a second that Jim talks about. The one that I think is his favorite is he worries about the concentration of wealth and privilege in the hands of a few. And he worries that the intrinsic values that you might want to talk about are, for lack of a better way of saying it, are incompatible with capitalism. And so when we try to be more other-oriented, it's difficult because of the concentration of wealth and privilege and the reliance upon extrinsic values. Now, I told you what extrinsic values were. Let me remind you of what we would refer to as intrinsic values. I'm talking here about things like empathy, intimacy, self-acceptance, a commitment to universal rights and equality. A society driven by those would look very much like the congregation of this church, because St. Andrew's Presbyterian seems to me to be very much a church that's driven by intrinsic values. So this concentration of wealth and privilege that troubles Jim is an ongoing problem. So is our inability, and I might even call it an unwillingness, to celebrate difference. Now, as a people, as a country, we're just not very good at it. And we're going to have to find a way to improve. Add to that the polarization that we experience from a two-party political system. And it's certainly now one that is very homogeneous within each party and an almost total failure to communicate. So that's a problem for us in terms of finding intrinsic values. For the last 2 generations at least, we've had an increase in specialization. And what does that do to a society? It leads to narrowness and to a limited worldview. And that's a problem for us. And then the one that I talked about in the first service that just absolutely breaks my heart and that is the decline in the liberal arts. You know, as an educator for 40 years and in that area, it was critical to my life and to the things that I believe. But we're in an age now where so many people declare the liberal arts to be irrelevant, when I would make the case there's never been a time when they're more relevant. Because when you think about intrinsic values, the way we teach and nurture them is through the liberal arts. And when we no longer have that vehicle, it makes maintaining intrinsic values extremely difficult. And then you may recall that I talked about briefly in October the trend for school boards, particularly in the South and Midwest, to become more conservative. And that's impacting what's being taught in public school, how it's being taught, who's doing it. So you've got 6 factors there that are very limiting in terms of maintaining a society based on intrinsic values. And if that were the end of it, if that was all we were confronting, then I might be holding out more hope at this moment in my message. But unfortunately, there are 3 other contemporaneous factors that make the situation even worse. And this will be a little political, because I need a term here to describe what I mean by this next one, and I couldn't find a neutral term. The one I'm just going to refer to it as is the Trump phenomenon. And what I mean by that is the polarizing effect that his advocacy has and his abject support as a politician of extrinsic values. We rarely in our history have had a politician whose overt focus was on extrinsic values. And that means he objectifies and exploits others. And it leads us to a very divisive society rather than one based on unity. Then add to that COVID and the pandemic that we experienced and the isolation that that produced and the miscommunication and the distorted information. It all created additional problems for us. And then one that is really scary. When you think about it, for the first time in our history, we have a Supreme Court that is actually undermining civil rights and civil liberties. So when you take all these factors together, we confront a very polarized society where it's almost impossible for people to move beyond their own personal experience. When you think about personal growth, it really requires intrinsic values. And when you don't have those, you're stuck in place. There's very little likelihood that you'll be able to move forward and grow. Now, my fear is that Nietzsche was right when, gosh, almost a century and a half ago, he said convictions, and what he meant by convictions was certainty. Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. When we are convinced of our rightness, that's when we most often should be examining our views to be sure that they can, in fact, survive a test of reality. It's not surprising to me that if I give you the date November the 16th, there are not many of us who would recognize that date and what we celebrate on it. But what we celebrate on November the 16th is the International Day for Tolerance. It's not one that we're spending a lot of time with here in our country. So the bottom line is I'm trying to make the case that those motivated by intrinsic values, if you will, the congregation of St. Andrew's Presbyterian, we've kind of lost control of the narrative, and we're struggling to regain that, and it's difficult to find a methodology that will allow us to do so. So I suspect I'm doing a decent job of depressing you. So, to try to turn that around, then let me give a 2-word transitional phrase, and yet. I'm convinced that there is a way forward. There are things that we can do to be more effective in relying upon intrinsic values. We certainly know that Jim Rigby, the eternal optimist, believes that. He thinks that we can make our way back to a society dominated by intrinsic values. I want to give you 3 very simple examples of what I think exemplify being able to rely a little more heavily on intrinsic values. Now, think of these as micro examples. I'm not talking about major change in society, just very little things. One of those, of course, is St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. Think of Jim Rigby for a moment. The number of years that he's been here, 4 decades. He's not the man now that he was when he came here. He's experienced a tremendous amount of personal growth. He's grown in his understanding of intrinsic values and how they influence his life. Look at your own behavior and what brought you to St. Andrews. I suspect in most cases it's a product of personal growth. Where you are now in terms of your worldview and how you live your life is quite different, I suspect, than it was in the past. You are still in touch with intrinsic values and therefore are able to grow. You know, still talking about St. Andrews, one of the things that offers me real encouragement about a chance for progress and a return to intrinsic values is when I look at how many young families we now have joining or attending St. Andrews. That's a very positive sign, not only about who we are, but about people in the society who are searching for a place, searching for a home. So St. Andrews is a good example. Now, a second little microcosm that'll make you feel, I hope, a little better about where we're going. There are organizations springing up that are committed to intrinsic values. One of those is an organization called More in Common. And this organization believes that as a society, even now, we have more in common than we have differences. But because we are so polarized, it's hard to find the commonality and let our lives be driven by that. And this organization and others like it are trying to find a way to do just that. And they're making inroads, they're making progress. It's very small. And then lastly, and this will probably drive Joe a little crazy here. Marianne and I lived in Georgetown in Sun City for 18 years. We've now moved to an independent living place. But Sun City is a very conservative community. And I have a lot of very conservative friends. And for most of our years there, I listened to them. That is, they engaged only in statement making. But over the last couple of years, they are now actually asking questions. And that's a real positive sign when it comes to societal change. They are sensing that something is not right and that what they have been saying in statement form may not be the best solution, the best course of action. So the fact that they're asking questions is very encouraging. Whether I'm giving them the right answers or not is an entirely different message. So I'm convinced that just thinking of these 3 little examples, that there is hope for the future. But I do believe that this is going to be one of those movements that's one person at a time. We're not going to have a charismatic figure step in and change society. We're going to have to do this on an individual basis. But here's the real good news that I've been kind of holding for later in the message. The perfect storm that we're experiencing right now, I'm firmly convinced will blow itself out. And the reason that I think it will is because it can't deliver on its promises, at least not for the many. It can for the few. The same affluent, privileged group will continue to prosper, but the many will not. And at some point, just like the folks in Sun City that I was describing, they'll start asking questions rather than making statements, and that offers us hope for the future. Now, I realize we have an impending election and we may or may not get good news there, but whether we do or we don't, the escalating pace at which we've been becoming a polarized society, I think, is in fact slowing down. One of the reasons that many of us worry about a solution to the problems that we're confronting is that we believe people who are marginalized and polarized in their thinking will require some kind of conversion experience in order to change the way they view the world and how they're approaching living. But I don't think that's the case. I think all that it takes to move a person along the road of personal growth is just a flash of insight. It doesn't always take a flood, just a little flash of insight. And I want to give you an example of that by telling you a story about a family member of mine and the impact that he had on my life. And I suspect that you have people like that in your life, and I'm convinced that the person I'm going to describe is a role model for the change that Jim Wrigley is talking about. Now, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my maternal grandfather. And I expect and pray and hope that you have these people in your life as well. And think about those people as I tell you about my maternal grandfather. He was a physician, general practitioner, grew up in South Alabama in a little small town called Greenville, about halfway between Montgomery and Mobile. He grew up in a very conservative community. He opened his practice in 1900, and he closed it in 1955 because of failing eyesight. So he practiced medicine for more than half a century. In many ways, he was a product of his community. He was the person you would expect him to be growing up in that environment. He was Southern Baptist, very devout in his religious beliefs. He was a deacon in his church. He was the moderator of the County Baptist Association. There's a standing joke in our family about that he and my grandmother were in church together only twice when they married and for her memorial service. Otherwise, he was attending First Baptist. She was attending First Methodist. And that's the way they carried out their religious practice. I mean, you're getting a sense of who the man was. But here's the thing about him and why I'm talking about flashes of insight. Being a general practitioner, he had a particular interest in anatomy and physiology, and he was constantly studying the human body. And he came to the conclusion after a number of years, we really aren't different at all. You know, we are all the same as human beings, so why do we keep focusing on difference? Hence, he believed with all his heart, and this followed his practice throughout those 55 years, he believed that everybody was entitled to competent medical care. Hence, he was one of the few physicians, for a period of time, the only one that we know of, who would make house calls on black families in South Alabama. I mean, he just thought people were people, and that's what you needed to do. And it carried over to his life practices because on multiple occasions, particularly in the first 25 years of the century, he concealed people in his house to keep them away from lynch mobs that were on the prowl. So here's a man who shouldn't, it would seem, have been able to live beyond his own experience, but he was in fact able to do so. If you want to get a feel for what he was like, if you know the PBS series called The Midwife, he was a much more austere version of Dr. Turner. In my grandfather's case, he always wore a black suit, starched white shirt, red bow tie. Now, let me tell you how he impacted my life, and again, it's why I'm encouraged about the future. After the death of my grandmother, and from 1950 to 1955, the last 5 years of his practice, on many a night, and particularly during the summer, I would spend the night with him. And invariably, there would come a phone call in the middle of the night, someone needing help out in the community. And he would pick up the phone, and this will tell you a lot about the town. His home phone number was 55, and his office phone number was 27. He would pick up the phone and say to the operator, call Wilson Smith, who lived 4 blocks away, and tell him, come get me, we've got to go out in the community on a house call. Now, my grandfather's home, family home, was 3 blocks away from where White Greenville crossed over into Black Greenville. And Wilson Smith lived in Black Greenville and was my grandfather's driver. So he would come pick my granddad up, get my granddad's car, they'd bundle me in the back seat, and away we would go. It's kind of a fun experience if you've ever, in a rainstorm, driven on red clay dirt roads, you will understand how dangerous life can be. But we would go to some really interesting places on these house calls. Eye-openers for a small kid in terms of the way some people had to live. What I remember most about those experiences are how nice the people were to me and how sweet the well water tasted. But I would typically stay either on the front porch of these one-room tar paper houses or stay in the back seat in the car. And you could tell how things had gone by my grandfather's appearance when he came out of the house. If his suit was still intact, his red bow tie looking good, then it had been a good evening. If, on the other hand, he had his coat slung over his shoulder, his tie was either askew or missing, then it had been a difficult evening. And I remember this one occasion that was a life-changing experience for me. And I expect you have similar experiences in your life. I remember he came out of the house in a disheveled appearance, and he sat down on the passenger side in the front seat, and he turned to Wilson Smith, and he said to him, Wilson, I wish I could have done more. And Wilson Smith's response is what has stayed with me and redirected my own life. He said to my granddad, Doctor, you did all that you could, and way more than anyone else is doing. Now, that didn't impact me right away, but it's a phrase that just appears in my thinking over and over again. It didn't affect me right away because I was entering, by 1955, a very troubled childhood. I grew up in a military family, and it's like being a preacher's kid. Either you embrace the lifestyle or you rebel against it, and I chose the rebellion route. So I had some tough teenage years, but ultimately I grew out of that. And the response of Wilson Smith and the life experiences of my grandfather changed who I was, because in my professional and personal life, everything I did, I asked myself the question, did I do all that I could? Now that's just a flash of insight that came to my grandfather in terms of the human body, that was then ultimately conveyed to me in terms of the value and importance of doing your best, and it changed in the end who I was. Now, I'm convinced that my grandfather is kind of the role model that Jim Rigby talks about when he believes that we can redirect our lives and we can focus on intrinsic values as impacting who we are and how we lead our lives. So it's my prayer that as we move forward as a church, that we'll do so in the spirit of the scripture that David read so beautifully for you just a few minutes ago. I believe that St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church and who you are making a difference. And my prayer is that it will always be so. I ask you now to reflect on these words.
I just received a text from Erica that our youth are logged in. Could you show, I know this is out of the order of, but can you show the Zoom people again? So, did they have to log off? Oh. Okay, sorry about that. But anyway, they were apparently logged in earlier. Okay. All right, well, we come to the time in our service when we express thanksgiving for all that we have and for all that people in the church do. And I wanted to tell you about the food pantry yesterday. We gave out food for 214 households. Now, for those of you who don't have a reference point for this, before COVID, we were giving out food for about 50 households. And we gave out food for 946 people. And what I'm hearing is that the family size is increasing. It was about 4 members per family, and now it's up to 4.3 or 4.4. And so we are so thankful for the many, many people who have donated money for food, who were there. Jim talked about intrinsic values. The value that everyone should eat is a value we hold very dear, and we are just blessed by everyone's support of this ministry. And now let us come together for our offering.
Please rise as you're able.
Remind everyone of Meet the Minister that's happening right after this service. And a special thanks to Jim Taylor for filling in for us today so graciously. And each of you is a child of that wonderful spirit of love that we sometimes call God. And that spirit knows when you skin your knee or your heart. That spirit knows when you admire a butterfly or cry in the darkness. So go out into this wonderful creation. Tell the whole world that they are loved just exactly as they are. Go and kiss the hurts of this world. Go and laugh and play in the fields of grace and love. Go in peace. Amen.